Okay, good morning. We just finished Yoreh Siman Sadi Aruch. We're about to start Sadi Bet, but I do want to go back to Seif Zain. We're not going to read it inside, just outside. What happens if you have milk and it splatters, and it lands on your piece of meat? It could be from a basar of a behema or for chicken. Not fish, we're not talking about fish. Milk landing on a piece of meat. It could be in your groceries. It spills in the same bag and it gets all over your meat. That happens once in a while. Not as often. It can happen in your refrigerator. In the olden days, it was more common, smaller fridges. You go in a cooler. You're traveling for Shabbos and you put milk or whatever, camping during the week. You have milk and meat in the same cooler and you have an accident and it spills all over. What do you do? So, it might help a little bit, or at least out of interest. The Shach gives you the summary. There's a three-way machloket rishonim. You can see it in the Shach. He quotes the list. This is Kaf Aleph. Shach, Sif Katan, Kaf Aleph. So there's three basic opinions. Okay, it's quick chazara. So if you have a piece of meat, that the first opinion says you have a piece of meat. Let's see. The first opinion is the most machmer opinion. That once you have a piece of meat and it falls into a bowl of milk and it's not batel b'shishim, so then what happens? The milk touches the meat. It doesn't matter if it's raw or cooked. Again, this is not the halacha. It's cold. Everything is cold. Thank you. Everything is cold. It's not la halacha. This is the first opinion of the Rishonim, and they hold as soon as it touches.
This is where the meat was once roasted.
Okay, so we'll say it like this: if it was once roasted or cooked, then it automatically, as soon as it touches, it's aser kedei klipa. Wherever the milk touches the meat, you must cut off a slice of meat from that piece of the meat. Touches. That I think is only if it's cooked. But if there's slits and crevices or it's very spicy, then it's the entire piece of meat comes aser. And kedei klipa, kedei netila will not help you because the crevices or the spiciness, that meat, milk, wherever it touches, it penetrates throughout the piece and it's absorbed. Okay. Remember, if it's cold, just interesting tidbit, if it's cold we're talking about, then it's an issue of absorption and you're not allowed to eat meat and milk together, even if they're not cooked together, it's together. So it's absorbed. You can't get it out anymore. It doesn't help to rinse it off, in this opinion. Anytime we're talking about heating, there's an element of both. Bishul, which could be bishul deraisa, absorption. But okay. Okay. Now, the second opinion basically says, anytime it's cold, no matter what, all you do is rinse it off. Okay? Assume it's less than 24 hours and nothing is salty. Okay? Anytime you have meat and milk mixed together, and even cold, cooked or raw, it doesn't matter. If it's cold, you always can just rinse it and you never have to do anything else. It doesn't matter if it's crevices, it doesn't matter if it's spicy. Okay, again, we're not talking about salty. That's discussed before. I don't want to get too complicated and too much chazara. We won't move. But we're talking about a regular piece of meat and that's raw or cooked. All you have to do is rinse off. That is the clear halacha according to the Shulchan Aruch and for Sfardim. If it's cold, you never have to do more, rinse it off. Okay. Now, third opinion, which is the opinion of the Ramah, with the caveat. The Ramah followed the same opinion, Shulchan Aruch, Behefsid Maruba. You have no food for Shabbos. Again, how you define that is a separate category. Whenever it's Hefsid Maruba and you're stuck, the Ramah agrees to the Shulchan Aruch, halacha, you only rinse. That's for Ashkenazim. However, normal case, what is the Ramah Paskin? Like this third opinion, Shulchan Aruch. Anytime they come in contact, so it depends. Anytime it's raw and it comes in contact and it's cold, all you do is rinse it off. So you come from the grocery store and your food is raw and it mixes, it's surrounded in milk, it's soaking in milk for less than 24 hours. All you do, everybody holds, you rinse it off, vizehu. That's the halacha. If you're going camping or you're going away for Shabbos, so then it depends if it's raw or if it's cooked. Anytime it's cooked or it drips on from the shelf and it touches the milk, touches the meat, then if it's been cooked or roasted once before, the halacha seems to be clear from any written source. You can ask different rabbanim. You'll get some answers where I don't know or this or that. Any written source, and most of who I've asked is clear. It's kedei klipa. If it's raw, you rinse it off. Anytime it's been cooked or roasted, then you must do kedei klipa. So if it's a drop or a few drops, you do kedei klipa where the drops are touching the meat. If it's surrounded, you got to do kedei klipa all the way around. But if it's bikaim, if there's slits or crevices, then you have to go all the way down to where there's could be slits and crevices, and or if it's very spicy. Again, the Chochmas Adam and the Kaf HaChaim says what is spicy. Even so spicy, you can't eat it the way it is. Okay, so similar to being too salty. You can't. Again, that's a machlokas about. Then it's kula, correct. I will mention one. It seems to be a das yachid. All the Rishonim, all the Achronim clearly say there's a difference between a cooked piece of meat that has crevices or slits and doesn't have. But the one substantial Achron is the Aruch Shulchan, who makes a comment that usually a cooked piece of meat will have crevices. I don't understand it. Some quote it in their Sfarim, but he's the only one who says something like that. So I don't know. I don't know what to do with it.
It's not as smooth as it's
Right. Correct. But all poskim, achronim, rishonim, all they all specify you can have a cooked piece of meat, and that's smooth. So and no one says his comment. So whatever. I just want to just to share. What else? Interesting. What happens if it lands on a piece of cooked chicken? So I did a shoot of har tzvi, Frank. It's an interesting opinion. On the one hand, it seems a little mako. On the other hand, it seems a little too strict. Here, like this: if the milk lands on a piece of chicken, it says normally for meat, we learned you have to remove kedei klipa. If it lands on a piece of chicken, since chicken is only derabanan, he says you can rinse off the chicken and then eat it cold. Because even after you rinse it off, there might be some milk there, and if you heat it up, you're going to be doing bishul with the milk and the chicken. So but I do think that's certainly reliable. Reliable to follow his psak. If you eat it, make pulled chicken salad out of it, then all you have to do is rinse it off. And again, the hefsed meruba issue makes it okay when you're stuck, even according to the Rama. Okay, I think that deals with that. Pretty much that's what that is. Yeah, okay. One last comment that's interesting the Shach points out. We learned the whole principle of, because we just had the case of a piece of meat falling inside milk. Since I started, I'll say it. It's not really appropriate, but We learned there's a principle of tata gavar. So he asks us an interesting question. How come you don't say, let's say you have a hot piece of meat and it falls into a bowl of milk. So we say the meat only becomes aser kedei klipa because the milk that's in the bottom of the bowl is cold, and that's tata gavar, so it's only kadei klipa. He says, but let's say you have the meat, it's a big piece of meat, and it falls to the bottom of the bowl. Now the milk is on top of the meat. So why don't you say tata gavar? Look what's on the bottom. So it's, someone's already nodded his head. So the shach nods his head as well and says, well, because whatever is originally in its place, that's what's deciding if it's tata or not tata. And then the next guy came in, the guest came in later, that's, you can't become the host, that doesn't become the tata. Okay, let's do Sadi Bet inside. Aleph. Okay, this is Im Nafal Chalav L'Kedera Shel Basar. So now you have, here we're talking about hot meat in a pot and some milk lands in there. So what? Al Ha'ish, I think so. Let's keep reading. Aleph, Kazayit Basar. So you have a piece of meat. Shenafa letoch Yoreh Shel Chalav. Okay, I guess it applies to here. Okay, good introduction. So here we go. Kazayit Basar Shenafa letoch Yoreh Shel Chalav. So now you have a pot of milk is boiling on the stove, right? And a piece of meat falls inside. Chalav roteach. To'em, so what do you do with this piece of meat? To'em agoy hakadera. Oh, you taste the meat. You bring a non-Jew to taste the, because basar b'chalav is really dependent upon flavor and taste. We're going to see the Ramah is going to comment about not using a goy nowadays, and we just go by shishim. So let's read. So to'em agoya kedera. So they get a goy to taste it, right? You can't taste it because it might be basar b'chalav and aser. Im amar sheyesh bata'am basar asura. If it has the taste of basar b'chalav, so that if the milk has the taste of basar, it becomes aser. The milk becomes aser. V'im lav muteret. Then it becomes mutter. Afilu bepacho mishishim. Even if it's not shishim kenegdo. We use shishim kenegdo because then we assume there's not going to be a flavor. But once you taste it, then you can determine if you can trust the taste buds, so then you can determine, but even without being shishim, right? Because it's all based on ta'am. Ve'oto chaticha asura. But that piece of meat itself is aser. Bamed varim amurim. What's the case? That the piece of meat is aser and the milk is aser. Keshekadam v'hotzi hachaticha kodem shetiflot chalav shabala. So that's if you take it out right away, before the milk stays inside with the meat, with the chaticha, and then the hainu kodem shetanua chayora meriticha.
It comes out.
Right, you want to take out the piece of meat before the treif, chalav that's inside the piece of meat becomes basar bechalav, and then from there it leaves and goes back into the pot. And then it can treif the whole pot. Hainu kodem shetanua chayora meriticha. So you want to take it out immediately while it's still boiling hot. Aval im lo hispik l'salcha shetucha liflot hachalav shabala. But if you leave it long enough, then the flavor from the milk that went inside the piece of meat became aser, and now that's going to go back inside to the pot. And alpha pishatam goy, even though the goy tastes it, ve'in bo tam klal, and there's no more flavor, asur elaim ken yesh bo shishim. Then we need a full shishim kenegdo.
Where?
In the milk, in the pot. You won't be able to differentiate. It becomes chalav with
The
chalav.
amount of challah that the meat could have absorbed is the size of the meat. We're worried about that challah mixing in with the rest of the challah. That's why you
And it'll be min b'mino of that chalav, and you won't be able to taste it. So the bottom line, and halacha anyways, we're going to go with shishim regardless.
Shishim.
In other words, it has to be 60 times the milk versus the piece of meat.
I understand, but like on the shishim, but does that go, because one is a liquid and one is a solid? It goes by volume, it goes by weight.
Volume, as far as I know.
The whole business today of Joe, going with the size, the width, it didn't mention.
Right. Okay. And then the Haggah continues. The ein anu noagin lismoch at ti'imas goy. We don't rely on ti'imas goy. Ubaninan shinshim b'chol inyan. So half of this Shulchan Aruch you can put in parentheses because we always go by shishim. Okay. All right. Let's read back.
Why did the meat have to be a kazayas? Is there any significance of being kazayas?
No. 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 It's not. No. No. Okay. Bet. Nafal chalav latoch kedera shel basar. Now here you have a drop of milk, or some milk spilled inside a pot, shel basar. The opposite. Now you're cooking meatballs or some kind of a stew on the stove, and you have meat inside. So then, toamim hachaticha shenafal alea hachalav. So we're going to read the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, and it's a little bit of a hard read for a couple, because there's a couple things that are not clear. But we'll first read it and then we'll explain. So let's see. So you taste the meat that the milk spilled on, right? The milk landed on one of the pieces of meat. Shenafal alea hachalav. Im ein ba ta'am chalav. If there's no taste of chalav in that piece of meat, hakol mutter, then everything's going to be mutter. That piece of meat that the milk landed on, because it didn't absorb a flavor, and for us, we would turn that into batel b'shishim. If that piece of meat is bigger in volume than the drop of milk. So if one drop of milk, chances are it's batel b'shishim. If you had a lot of milk pour in onto that piece of meat, then it probably won't be. Right? Whatever the case is.
Why is this more calm than what we were just learning before about the crevices, and why don't you have to do Kedei Klipa?
This is hot.
That's exactly the
This is
question.
like a Deah person.
So what?
You're right.
Okay, so it could be the meat is on the fire. So since the meat is on the fire and it's a kli rishon, I think we say it goes through the entire piece of meat. But we will double check. I don't think kalipa works over here.
Yeah.
And okay. We're going to see this more as we go along, and we're going to see this better when we get to Tzadichet and onward with Tarovis. So then, Hakol Mutter. So then everything is Mutter if it's Batel B'Shishim. That it landed on. So then, or it's not Shishim Kenegdo. So then, Ne'esra Ota Chaticha. That piece of meat is aser. Okay. Again, an uledidan dein somchin agoy, and we don't rely on agoy. Beinan shishim b'chaticha. We need shishim kenegdo. About im lav kula asura, and therefore everything is aser unless it's shishim kenegdo. Okay. Let's keep reading, and then I'm going to go back. Umesharim bekula, and now. Umisharim bekula bechol ma sheyesh bakadera me'achaticha v'hayerek v'hamarak v'hatavlin. And we look at the whole pot to see if there's shishim kenegdo. Kadei shetei chaticha zo echad mishishim me'akol hachaticha me'akol hachaticha asura. Now, if the whole pot is shishim keneged the Chaticha zo echad mishishim.
Yeah, if the rest of the pot is shishim keneged the chaticha is also for the rest of the pot.
So right. The pot's not going to be an issue. We'll see. She'etei chaticha zo echad mishishim me'akol. So then the chaticha is going to be asura, v'hasha'ar mutter. And if there's shishim. So we're going to see if you need to have shishim neged the whole chaticha or not. You don't, but you'll see. Either way, the chaticha is aser, unless the chaticha itself, it's batel b'shishim, it's one drop of milk versus too much. But regardless, the rest of the pot is going to become mutter. What are we talking about? B'shelo ni'er akdera. You know what? Maybe I'll take a step back here, and we'll continue from this point. So the Gemara basically has the case that we read, but it's a machlokas between the Ri and Rashi. What is the case? And when you read the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't really say which side he takes, nor from the Rama. It's unclear what the halacha is. And the Kaf HaChaim says that basically neither one of them gave a clear psak, and the halacha is lachumra, and it's kind of mashma that way from their words, that we are generally machmer according to both. The Shach says similar, but the Shach says really me'ikar din, we more choshesh for the Ri, which is usually the derech hapsak, versus Rashi. So what is the case? There's two possibilities what the case is. So you have a pot of meat, and inside there's pieces of meat, right? And there's a lot of pieces of meat, so that one of the pieces of meat, the pot has a lot of pieces of meat, so that one of the pieces of meat is half in and half out. It's a full pot of meat. And so one of the pieces is half in, half out. That's one opinion, right? Of the broth. Exactly. The other opinion says, no, it's even fuller. That you have one of the pieces of meat is on top of the piece of meat that's half in and half off. So the top piece of meat is not even touching the broth.
That's the read.
So I'll read it from the Shach so I don't get mixed up. The Ri sober dafka shekola chaticha chutz rotev. Exactly. The Ri says it's only the case that we're talking about, that only that the top chaticha is completely out. Therefore, when the milk reaches that top chaticha, that piece of meat must be shishim keneged that milk. And everyone would agree, Rashi and the Ri, in that case, that piece of meat needs to be 60 times bigger, otherwise it's going to become aser. Right? The whole thing is aser, it goes through and through. It goes through. However, according to the Ri, if you have a different case of the Gemara, and the top piece of meat would be half in and half out of the broth, and the drop of milk or splatter of milk lands on that one piece of meat that's half in, half out, he says since it's touching the broth, you're mistarif the whole broth together right away. Because it goes through and through, it's al eish, it's ta'agavar, and therefore, if the entire pot together is more than the milk, then even that one piece is mutter, lechatchila.
So the read is more makel.
In this case, the Ri is more makel. Correct. But you see the Shulchan Aruch is a little, you kind of see, it's not 100% clear, but that's what the general accepted understanding is. Right, the Shach points out most of the Mechabrim, and since he was written many years ago, that means most of the Rishonim hold like the Ri. That's what he holds in Mikardin. But okay, the Rashi would hold that if it's half in, half out, so if the milk splattered into the broth, then obviously that would all be mixed together. But if it lands on the portion of the meat that's sticking out of the broth, since it's not in the broth, it's out of the broth, then that piece of meat has its own category. Okay.
But the whole piece of meat, even the part that's under the broth.
Yeah, the whole thing becomes aser. It's davuk, whatever. It's all one piece of meat. Okay. So that's the machloket Ri and Rashi. That helps.
Well, unless that's shishim, that's sticking out.
Yeah, if it's batal b'shishim, then it's okay. But if it's not batal b'shishim, it's not okay. Now, let me see. Okay. So let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. So it reads like this: B'meh devarim amorim. When do we say that the top piece of meat becomes aser? That's if and you can't use the rest of the pot to be mevatel, to count it together to be mevatel b'shishim. That's b'shelo ni'er akdera batchila kishenaf ala chalav. That's when you let it sit there, and you didn't immediately, as soon as you see the milk splatter, you have a little bit of time. It's unclear how much, but you have a little bit of time. You have to quickly, immediately as you see it, go and either you have to mix the kedera. So you say in this case, when the chaticha becomes aser, when you can't use the whole pot, it's kesheloni er. You didn't immediately stir it. El basof. You wait a while, and then you start to stir it. Or velo kisa, or you didn't put the lid on it immediately. Because if you put the lid on it immediately, then it's in a small little area with a lot of steam, and then it mixes it all together. If you mix it up immediately, is an expression of mitchila va'ad sof. So the achronim some of the achronim, Shach, Taz, others, does it mean literally ad sof? So the Shach thinks the Shulchan Aruch holds the entire time, but he disagrees with that understanding.
What's the time? Until when?
It's unclear. Well, Ada Sof means until probably until it cools down. Yeah, but as long as it's cooking, until it cools down. You have to be stirring it non-stop. But that's the way the Shach understands the Shulchan Aruch. He disagrees, but but the Taz, Kafachayim, and others don't understand the Shulchan Aruch that way, and it just means you stir it long enough that everything mixes in. Like you just mix in that one piece of meat. Or if it's on the top, you mix it a few times so it all mixes together. Okay. So Lamaisa, it means you stew it a few strokes in the beginning, and that's enough. Oh, shekisa mishat nefila, or you immediately cover the lid, ve'ad sof, and until you finish cooking it. Hakol mitzaref levatel ta'am lachalav. So then you can do it together, and it's fine. Okay, v'chein, maybe we'll stop here. You want to stop here? Okay, we'll stop here. We'll pick up with the Rama tomorrow.
Are we mitzaref the